Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking Season 1 of iZombie. Now, in this review, I'm really going to try and avoid spoilers for you folks, so I'm just going to talk about things in general. So this isn't going to be one of my videos where I really kind of get into an in-depth analysis of the plot or the characters. This is just kind of my general thoughts on the show and its debut season. And in short, oh man, I love this show. It is great. Now, iZombie is another one of those shows on the CW that does come from a comic book, which I've never actually read. I did see it at the store one time, but I never got around to giving it a look. However, in a way, it's almost irrelevant because from what I've read, they mostly just took the extremely marketable name iZombie and the extremely marketable idea of zombies and kind of just went from there. So yeah, whatever story they had in the comics, this is basically iZombie in name only. However, they handed this show off to a fellow named Rob Thomas. No, it's not the guy from the band Matchbox 20, uh, although they do have the same name. Instead, this was the fellow who was the main guy behind Veronica Mars, which was a show up on the old WB network several years back, and of course, also the guy behind the extremely successful Veronica Mars movie, which raised the money for it to pay for itself on Kickstarter in a day. And Veronica Mars, when it was on the air, was literally my favorite show. It was, in a lot of times, the highlight of my week. I loved the show that much. And Rob Thomas, and you can tell it shows here in iZombie, had learned a lot making Veronica Mars, and he brings that experience to iZombie, and it's everything that made Veronica Mars is good, except here it's tighter and more fine-tuned, and it is good. I mean, I love Veronica Mars, don't get me wrong, but there really were moments in the writing on that show that I wanted to beat my head against the wall because, come on, that's BS. But that's a rant for that's a rant that's several years past its expiration date, so I'm not going to get into that. But nonetheless, Rob Thomas earned an enormous amount of respect from me for what he did with Veronica Mars, and that respect continues to be well earned here on iZombie. The writing, the casting, the directing, everything that the showrunner is really meant to handle, Rob Thomas does, and he does so well. So that guy has nothing but the highest respect from me. Now the folks on the show. This is the first time I've ever really been exposed to Rose McIver, who plays, of course, Liv. But man, she is another just really amazing actress. She won me over within a couple of minutes, the same way that Kristen Bell did within a few minutes of the first episode of Veronica Mars. And again, I have to give her a lot of credit because she's actually a New Zealand native, but her American accent pretty much flawless. I mean, if I'd never heard her speak in her natural voice, I would never have guessed that she wasn't from the States. But she's really the centerpiece of this show, and she exhibits enormous range. She does comedy amazingly well. She does that sarcastic snarkiness that Rob Thomas brought so well to Veronica Mars, and she handles it. Well, Kristen Bell herself could not have done any better. So yeah, Rob Thomas clearly made the right choice there. And of course, she also displays enormous pathos and tragedy because season 1 is at times extraordinarily unkind to Liv as a character, but she just delivers every single time. And you really can't ask for much more than that from a lead actress. I also really like the supporting characters on the show because at the end of the day, iZombie is the story about Liv. But we also have some other very talented people on the show, and you do have to forgive me. I have a horrible inability to remember actors' names. So I'm probably just going to be referring to them by the name of their characters and stuff because again, I just can never remember actors' names. Um, so apart from Liv, we also have her ex, who is a guy with the absolutely ridiculous name of Major Lillywhite. And you look at this guy, and he almost seems like a satire of the generic love interests you see in media directed at young women. Yeah, let's put it that way. He seems like a cookie, like these generic good, a satire on the generic good boyfriend you see in a lot of really crappy media aimed at young women. And what's really fun about this is, and I was reading an interview with the actor after they finished up season one, and he said he was a little reluctant to actually take the role because he's like, look, I don't want to play just another cookie cutter boyfriend. And Rob Thomas is like, look, trust me on this. Your character is going to go on an amazing journey, and he delivers. I mean, Major starts off as this ridiculously nice guy who works at a shelter for, you know, underprivileged teens. I mean, just like the biggest nice guy cliche you could ever hope to find. And then by the end of the season, man, has he changed. I mean, he still is at his heart a good person, but Major's a guy who has been through the ringer several times over. And the final episode, he gets to get let's put it this way, he gets to tell somebody off and kick ass in some major ways, if you'll pardon the expression, that were just an amazing crescendo for his character. I was kind of just went there, started out the season with being a little bit bored and unimpressed by Major, to it's like, damn Major, you're a cool guy. I like you. Um, so also we have as a character, we also have Ravi, who's sort of Liv's boss at the morgue, and becomes her ally in the whole trying to do good with this whole I'm a zombie thing. And he's a cool guy. Ravi is one of those characters where he's kind of like, if you watch Veronica Mars, Ravi is the Wallace here. Um, so he's kind of like the guy who's like, you know what, I'd want to be friends with the guy. Robbie's he's a gamer, he's a big geek, but he's not one of those Big Bang Theory stereotypes of nerds that I can't stand. Yeah, Robbie's a big nerd and stuff, but he also realizes like, hey, I'm a handsome British doctor. That hot girl over there, I think I've got a reasonably decent shot at things with her, which is also a very nice, refreshing change. It's sort of nice to show that they take the time to show that yes, geeky people can be quite attractive, can have good social skills, and the like there. Ravi, though, he is a little bit disappointing in that we really don't get to see very much about him that isn't related to his relationship with Liv. We do get to see a little bit of his social life, which does kind of become a bit of a factor towards the end of the season. But again, he only makes, like, for example, the most minimal mention of his family. We get very little information on his past, other than a brief mention of having worked for the CDC in the pilot episode. So again, we really don't have a very good picture of Ravi, who he is outside of his relationship with Liv, which is rather disappointing. And this kind of brings me to the character of Clive, which is the policeman that helps Liv out in this series. And he suffers from the same thing. Clive is a fun character. He's a cool guy. He's a good cop and all that. But outside of his relationship with Liv, we do get a brief bit in one episode. But again, outside of that relationship with the main character, he really doesn't seem to have any life. We really know virtually nothing about him outside of his relationship with the protagonist. And that's disappointing. Obviously Liv, iZombie is Liv's story. All right? Everything is always going to be centered around Liv. She is the anchor of things. But the supporting characters, they need to have their own things going on, just the way, the people around us have their own things going on. Like Major, for example, Major is a guy who goes out there. He has his own stuff going on. He has an important relationship with Liv, but his character really gets to go through some awesome stuff that, while it is related to Liv, is totally his thing. Clive and Ravi, they don't really get that. And in a way, it's also the same with Liv's mother and brother. They're pretty much just stock characters. I mean, her brother more or less vanishes off screen for the vast majority of the season, only to come back for a minimally important role at the end of things. Her mom, well, again, is not really very well fleshed out. And it just sort of feels like they just didn't want to, like, okay, her family is dead and she has no friends, and like some crappy 90s comic book vigilante. But they take these characters who you would think would be massively important in her life, and they really never evolve very much beyond stock characters, to use the technical phrase from writing. So I mean, just to kind of give you an example, Blaine is the main bad guy. His lieutenant, Julian, is more fleshed out than the main character's mother and brother. Let me say that again. The right-hand guy of the main bad guy gets more character development than the protagonist's own mother and brother. Look, I'm all for fleshing out side characters, but you really need to put the focus where it. Okay, I think my point is made. Anyway, nothing really particular to say about Julian there, but Blaine. Now, he was played by the guy who was Adam Monroe over on Heroes several years back, and I didn't realize this until I actually saw somebody mention that online. I would never have guessed, because the guy that plays him, I guess it's just sort of the makeup and the costuming and whatnot, but he actually read to me as being younger than Adam did, even though that was several years ago. I mean, really, I would not have guessed these were the same person. I just would have kind of thought there were people who looked sort of similar. But, well, let's face it. Do we really want to remember Heroes past Season 1? No, of course not. Because after Season 1, Heroes really, really started to stink. But anyway, he plays Blaine, who is the main antagonist of this season. And boy, he does a great job. Blaine is bad, he's funny, and he is an intelligent adversary. He's a planner, he's a thinker. He's somebody who really started out, before he became a zombie, as pretty much nobody important. But when the whole zombieism thing hit, he rose to the occasion. He really found something inside of himself to become someone extraordinarily dangerous. And the question of, well, how in the world is Liv going to deal with this guy? I mean, he's a ruthless son of a bitch, and he's pretty damn smart. And while Liv is certainly not dumb in any way, dealing with somebody like this is really, really not in her wheelhouse. And of course, that's the big major conflict for this season. And when the resolution in episode 13, I mean, it's pretty damn good stuff. A lot of things coalesce, and they do so in an extraordinarily satisfying way. I mean, you're like, man, that was great. That was cool. So let's see, what else? Yeah, I mean, there really is very little that I have to criticize in this episode. This season. Just that fact that the side characters really could have used more fleshing out. Again, as I said, they're not bad characters, like especially Clive and Ravi, even though we don't get a huge amount of insight into them outside of their relationship with Liv. But if we really want to have a strong season 2, I think we need to kind of get into who people like Ravi and Clive are. There have been hints from the interviews I've seen with Rod Thomas that we're going to be seeing more of just exactly what Blaine's deal is in season 2. And I'm totally down for that. Blaine was a great character, but apart from drug dealer turned evil zombie, he didn't really have a huge amount of depth to him. He was certainly very fun, but not very deep. And yeah, I mean, that's really the only serious criticism that I can offer up of iZombie. Well, okay. I suppose that's not entirely true. You do sort of notice that while iZombie does a reasonably good job in terms of ethnic diversity, uh, the two most developed characters on the show are still Major and Liv, the two white people. So you have Clive, who's black, Ravi, who's Indian, Chief Suzuki, who's Asian, and also a fairly important side character. All of these sort of people all the non-white people sort of float around, and they do get their nice moments, but it's still the two white people who are really the stars of the show. And I'm certainly not implying that anyone behind the scenes is in some way being discriminatory or malicious in any way, shape, or form. Seriously, one thing I can't stand is people throwing around words like discrimination or racism all willy nilly, basically the way frickin' Tumblr does. If you're going to say that about someone, you're making an extraordinarily damning accusation about their character. And I absolutely do not believe that in any way, shape, or form about anyone involved in the production of this show. In fact, this show should really be saluted for making what seems to me to be a pretty darn good stab at trying to show Seattle as diverse a place as it really is. Now, with that said, though, this does sort of come back into my main criticism that Liv is of Liv, of course, is the center of the show, so everything is going to revolve around her. But it's her and Major who get the most development, and Ravi and Clive and whatever characters they introduce in the next season, they really need to be allowed to spread their wings and fly a little bit more. And that generally is the only major criticism that I can level at iZombie. So, ladies and gentlemen, with that said, if you haven't watched the show, then wow, have you missed out? This is fun stuff. This is what TV was meant to be. Okay, this is all right. I've had dinner. I'm home from a long day of work. It's time to just chill out, relax, and have a good time. This is what stuff like iZombie is for, and it's perfect for it. This is a fun show, and you really are missing out if you don't at least give it a try. So, with that said, everybody, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.